Welcome, residents, to another edition of Talk of the Town with your supervisor, Dick Thurston. And today I'm continuing with our discussions, since this is Women's History Month, and in recognition of the many great things that our female employees, female residents are doing for the town, actually tremendous contributions. I have with me Barbara Roberti, who heads up a major department here in the town, and we'll talk a little bit more with Barbara about that. But what I wanted to really highlight is, again, we're entering the middle of the month, and we have St. Patrick's Day coming up on Friday. So to everyone that enjoys that time of year and the green traditions, please have a nice, safe, and healthy, Friday and through the weekend. But more importantly, green is also a symbol of the new time of the year, because on Monday, believe it or not, with the snow outside, we're going to start spring, as far as the calendar goes. And spring for the town is a time of a lot of work, because everybody's getting ready for their do-it-yourself projects, and that involves a lot of permitting, right? And coming to the town. And when we look at permits, and I think with Barbara and her department, we really don't want to block you from doing something. We want you to do it in a healthy and safe way. That's why our rules and codes are actually there, to make sure that when you're building a swimming pool, when you build a deck, that it functions properly and it doesn't cause any problems. So with Barbara, she can tell us about how long have you been working with the town of Wappinger?
23 years.
Wow, 23 years. And you've seen how many supervisors change?
I think you're number 7.
I'm number 7. Okay. Tell the folks what you do, what your department is, right? So they know, and kind of the multiple job responsibilities, because also you cover zoning and planning board meetings, support the town board. But why don't you just give a brief summary of that and your staff, and what they do?
So our department is comprised of the building department, the fire inspector, the zoning board of appeals secretary, and the planning department. So we function on many levels. For the residents, we follow the New York State Building Code as far as decks and pools and additions. And we're here for your safety. We make sure that anyone working at your house has insurance. We inspect it to make sure it's done properly, so that your deck, won't fall off your house while you're sitting there, that your pool is safe so that you don't have to worry about somebody getting hurt in it. And the compliance is really what we're looking for, so that we come in and finally finish it out and get you a CO on your project, whatever it is. And as the supervisor said, this is going to be a very busy time for projects, because the spring's coming and everyone's getting itchy to barbecue and swim and enjoy their backyard. So we have 2 clerks. They're phenomenal. They're so sweet, and they're very helpful. So those would be the first 2 phases that you would see with Krista and Susie, and they're wonderful and very helpful. After you apply for a permit, myself and then the building inspectors will check it for compliance. We make sure that your builder, your contractor, or yourself has got good plans, so that the end product will be excellent. Unfortunately, if you don't meet setbacks, I have to deny it, and it will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that's a 5-member quasi-judicial board who can waive the code. For me, it's black and white, and for them, in good design, they go out to your property, and we all want you to succeed. We want you to have the pool. We want you to have the garage or whatever you would like to build. And then for other projects, sometimes you need to go to the planning board. You want to have a hairdressing studio in your home or some sort of office. You can go to the planning board, as well as commercial.
Right.
So commercial, of course, always go to the planning board. And the planning board will make sure that it fits into our character of our town. It will make sure that everything's safe, lighting, landscaping, so that you have a good product at the end of the day.
Right. No, that's right. You mentioned setbacks. So yes. Setbacks, maybe you can just explain to a lot of our new residents what that is.
Sure. So there's setbacks on your property for accessory structures. An accessory structure would be a shed or a pool or a garage. And the reason there's setbacks is so that you're not on top of your neighbors. So smaller projects, anything under 144 square feet, needs to be 10 feet from your side and 10 feet from your rear. Unfortunately, if you want to put a garage or something larger, each zone has a different setback. So averagely, it's 20 to 25 feet from the side and 40 or 50 feet from the rear, depending on where you live. There are some smaller zones,
right.
but we would help you with that individually when you came into the town. And that's so that there's some room not only for your yard, but for your neighbors, so that you don't have all kinds of structures right on top of property lines.
Exactly. And we deal with a number of cases there. Also, one that I think a lot of residents are not all that familiar with, and sometimes because the real estate broker doesn't tell them, has to deal with easements. And we've had a lot of issues with respect to that. Why don't you explain what types of easements are there, how it may affect their property, and what we have to do?
So easements are placed on subdivisions. Every house started somewhere in a planning board. And they might be an easement. It's usually a 20-foot easement is average easements. That would put 10 feet on one property and 10 feet on the other property to share. And an easement is property that belongs to you, but that, depending on whose easement it is, has the rights to go through it. So it could be a sewer line, could be a water line, it could be drainage, it could be Central Hudson has an underground line. And what that means is you own it, and you can use it, but you can't put a structure in it, just based on the fact that someday we may need to go through either the town or Central Hudson, or depending on whose easement it is.
Even a fence you may not be able to put on it.
Can't put anything in it, including a fence. We really don't get involved with landscaping, but trees are probably not a good thing if there's a water line or a sewer line due to the roots.
And part of the issue is, with respect to our water and sewer lines, is that they do occasionally rupture, have a leak, and so the leak, you can't determine where the location will be, not near a manhole culvert or what have you. And that's in part because also the shifting ground. Our soil has a lot of rock in it, but also the fact that if a tree is built over it, sooner or later it can cause the pipe, the welding, whatever, to separate. So that's why we look at that. And sometimes it goes unknown for a while and could cause further problems with respect to cave-ins in the ground, et cetera. So that's why, from a health and safety point of view, I will mention that we have conservation easements, right? So maybe you mention that, because some people are confused by what that means.
So town of Wappinger, as many towns in Dutchess County, have a lot of wetlands, and there are three types. There are DEC, which is New York State wetlands. Then there is Army Corps of Engineer wetlands, those are federal. And then we have town wetlands. And when you have wetlands on your property or nearby, you can't put anything in them, because that's our environment, and we want to protect the fauna, the flora, we want to protect the birds, we want to protect the amphibians, everything that helps keep our environment in a steady keel. The town of Wappinger had one of the most progressive wetland laws, I believe in 2005. We put an additional 100 foot around them as a buffer to protect it. The DEC on their own have 100 foot. So you have to be very careful when you buy property or have property for these buffers. With the buffer in the wetlands, you cannot place structures.
So I had an issue a few years ago where a resident came in because they had met with your office with one of our clerks, and they were upset because they were told that because of wetlands, they could not put in a swimming pool in the back. They said, but we have 7 acres. but in fact, you know, the only area that was buildable was 1 acre, and unfortunately, a real estate broker, you know, failed to tell them, and they didn't notice on the map, because it should be registered where there's a, you know, where there's a conservation easement or utility easement, right? That will be on the development map.
Correct. Unfortunately, we have some older properties that do not have that mapped. Wetlands do move. Sometimes they shrink and sometimes they increase. So it's always best, if you're selling your house, please come in and visit us. We'll be more than happy to show you what we know to be legal. Your process to selling the house will be smoother at the end if there's anything you need to get a permit for. We implore anyone buying a house, come and check what this property has so that when you buy it, you know exactly what you bought. And to the brokers, I believe some of them just are not knowledgeable, or what their tools are may not show them. So going back to an easement, what the town does when it does a subdivision and it has a lot of wetlands or steep slopes, there are a list of reasons, we'll put what we call a conservation easement over it. It gets filed with the county, and it basically protects that land from development forevermore.
So in the neighborhood in which I live, there are a number of, you know, that was a development, so a number of conservation easements over property that the individual resident owns, but they can't, you know, do anything to go put in a garage on that property.
You also can't clear trees. If you have a tree that's diseased, it's fallen, or maybe in danger of falling into your property, you can take down that tree, but you can't clear it. The whole point is to keep that property protected.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a real challenge that we have today is that so much of the town was developed 30, 40 years ago. And when you look at the wetlands, actually the wetlands, you know, are there ultimately to take water away and get it into the 3 bodies of water, you know, Oppinger's Creek, Sprout, and then the Hudson River, you know, for drainage. But what we found, and where we spend a lot of time, and including the highway department, our building department, is that a lot of the old drainage now has been filled in, eroded, trees fallen, leaves dumped there, and therefore we're seeing more problems with drainage. We're what we call an MS4 community, and maybe Barbara, you could just describe what that means and how it may impact our residents.
So an MS4 community such as ours is a town that has an incredible infrastructure of streams and waterways. Some we don't see, they're underground, some meander through people's property. And what we're trying to do is protect the town from runoff. I think everyone who lives here has experienced some sort of flooding with the weather changes. We've had very, very wet weather in the spring, which has caused flooding in basements or through yards. So as an MS4 community, as we proceed and build things, we make them create basins, stormwater basins, that captures the water and then slowly lets it recede or bring it away from the structures, so that going forward, hopefully we'll be able to capture a lot of what is today flooding. And
also when we see a developer or a property owner that is actually tearing down trees, leaving soil exposed, because that sediment could run into one of those areas, further block it, then, you know, we write the person up. Would you explain what that means generally as to our code?
So commercial property cannot be stripped until they've gone through the planning board. Residential, if you have a tree or two that you want to take down, that's fine, that's your right, you are a homeowner. If you want to clear a large portion of land and take the stumps out, we consider that grading because it changes the contour of the land, and we have the resident take out a grading permit, and this way we can see how that property is going to change, because you could change the grade to a point that you could cause flooding to a neighbor or water, and that could be detrimental. So we have to protect it.
Right. So we're constantly looking at that. Our inspectors, code enforcers, you know, go out and first try to talk with the developer, the resident, and try to work with them to get them code compliant. You know, we'll recommend doing things with respect to it. Sometimes it's as simple as you notice a lot of this black, plastic material that's along the side of a project. That's to keep the erosion,
That's
right?
Silt fence,
Silt fence.
and that has to be put up when you're moving large areas of land from mud and from rain coming. And there's different types of silt fence depending on the slope. Sometimes it has hay bales to keep it back. And this is all for everyone's protection. One other item, a homeowner wants to take a tree down, that's fine. But you might notice that a lot of trees come down this time of year, because from April 1st to October 1st, you cannot cut trees in mass because of the Indiana bat. And the New York State Department of Conservation protects them. So you'll see a lot of commercial land, if it's being developed, cut their trees and fell them this time of year just to get them down. The bats roost late April to early May, and we need to protect them.
Well, in fact, it is an aspect of, I think, the quality of life of the town that we have a number of endangered species and living in the town, habitating here. So a lot of them are in wetlands near water bodies, which do cause a lot of our folks that want to do something some headaches, right? Because they have to comply with that, and also we have to check it out, make sure there isn't endangered species such as along Sprout Creek, where we have issues with turtles, salamanders, a variety of creatures. Of course, by the Hudson River, more eagles, and so that takes a lot of work, with the department. And one of the areas that has been a big concern and focus of ours, and Barbara and her team, our engineers, and various people work with us, is that it's also related to water, in that we have probably still about half of the town, land mass-wise, that are on their own private water wells. They're not part of the town municipal system, or they have their own septic system. Now, in recent years, the Department of Health has gotten much more strict, but at the same time we see wells failing because they were shallow. The makeup, the composition of our geology is not conducive to shallow wells anymore, and tightening regulations. So, we've been working together over the years, actually, to protect our farmlands, to get water source protection. I'll propose again shortly a bill that will protect it. But why don't you explain what we do to help our homeowners? Because, Department of Health does have a lot of restrictions, and therefore they may have had a well and a septic system before, but the lot's too small to do it now.
It's very hard to put a well and septic on less than a half an acre. The health department has a 100-foot separation. And we have a lot of older communities where they're on very small lots.
Like Houstonville,
Chelsea, where the wells and the septics are not that far from each other. And when the wells are shallow, there's always that concern that your well could be contaminated with E. coli or some other component. In fact, our town actually has a well law, which is really good for anyone moving in. So if your house is being sold, it's required that the buyer get a well test, and not the simple one for E. coli, but it's called the part 5, excuse me. And this way, the new owner has access to know if their well is safe to drink.
So it could be mineral content, right?
Sure.
Chlorides, a variety of things that mean that, you could put in the most expensive filtration system, but still may not solve the problem, correct?
And then in a case like that, you might have to put a UV system in, because everyone deserves clean and portable water for their family.
So in addition to that, I was able to get a grant a couple years ago. We created a committee, Barbara is on it, that looked at water source protection. We had engineers and actually a task force that did a comprehensive study, at least of 2 of our aquifers. So previously I tried to get passed some legislation, but we're going to resubmit that would give more protection to our aquifers, to our private wells, correct?
Correct.
So we're doing those things, conservation easements over farmland, like with Alex Reese,
right.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And that protects that land from
Right.
major development decades from now.
Yeah. So when does an item go to the Planning Board or Zoning Board versus the, let's say it this way, when does an item come to the Town Board rather than Planning Board or Zoning Board?
So if somebody owns a tract of land that they would like to, say, make commercial and it's currently residential, they would come to the Town Board and ask for a rezone.
Okay.
If somebody wants to get into the water or sewer district that their property currently is not, they'd have to petition the town board. Sometimes text amendment. So the way zoning works, we have a chart and we list most uses. But if the use is not there, I mean, different uses have come up over the last 50 years. Doggy daycare was not a use 25 years ago. Today, that's a big use.
Yeah.
So the town board is the only board that could put that use
Right.
into our code. So those are the reasons for.
And that's why you're seeing more of those types of issues come before the town board, because there is, well, most of the really good land has already been developed, or it's protected as farmland, or we're trying to protect some more. So, that's where a lot of these issues, come up. So, I thank you, very much for all that you and your staff and team are doing. And I just want to remind people before we close that before as you get in your mind, the desire to put in a new deck, a shed for your lawnmower, or a swimming pool, or a kiddie's pool, or even sometimes a playground set, please come to our department and just ask the question first. They'll be more than helpful to tell you what you need to do and help walk you through the way. But don't go ahead and hire an engineer, an architect, or someone to do it before talking with us, because we could really help you find your way through sometimes the maze, right? Of these.
I have one plea, in a sense, to all our residents. We're at that time of the year when you're going to see pools in Target and Walmart, and a lot of people are under the understanding it's temporary. While it is temporary, you still need a building permit. And there's the safety of your children and other visitors with that pool. You cannot run extension cords to a pool. It's not safe. So please come and see us. You can call us if you have questions. We're more than happy to help you go through what's necessary to make you decide, do I buy a less expensive pool, or do I buy a pool from a pool company?
Sure. Yep.
So that's important. We need to close out pools to make sure they're safe before the swimming season begins.
Exactly. So thank you. Thanks for everything. And thank you, residents, for tuning in to this presentation. And I hope that you do have a lovely weekend. And so until soon, please stay safe and remain well. Thank you.